Welcome to Pause on Purpose. I'm Paul Fredericks. And you know what? I want to remind you, drop me a line at phoenixpastors@gmail.com. Drop me an email. Let me know how these are impacting you. Maybe one in particular struck you, or maybe you go back to it time and again. Maybe it's a good reminder. Maybe it's an encouragement. Whatever it is, would you just drop me a line? That would help us as we prepare for future Pause on Purposes. But for today, we're going to continue our series on honesty and integrity. And this day is no different. And we're talking about honesty and integrity with ourselves pretty much this week. Years ago, the pop artist Michael Jackson had a song, and it was a big smash hit. It was called The Man in the Mirror. And if you remember it, you may or you may not. The whole message behind it is he was looking at himself and saying, I've got to make some changes. And there comes a time in our lives where the woman or the man has to look themselves in the mirror, in the eye, and say, I don't like what I am, who I'm becoming, and I want to make changes. And we go to God and we ask him to help us change, to make the change within us. How do we do that? What standard do we use? What's going to keep us true north? Well, my Bible is open to James chapter 1 and verse 23. James chapter 1 and verse 23. And the writer of James is just kind of a no-nonsense guy. He doesn't go around the barn or beat around the bush. He doesn't pacify the words. He doesn't make them palatable. He just cuts to the chase. And sometimes the way he says things, we go, whoa. If we said that in today's culture, a lot of people might be and probably would be offended. Let's listen to what he says about helping us understand to face the person in the mirror, the woman or the man. James writes, verse 23 of James chapter 1. He says, if anyone's a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law, meaning the scriptures, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. Notice what James says. Notice what he calls the word of God. First, it's the perfect law. Second, it's the law of liberty. It's not a law of bondage. People reject the word of God because they think it's nothing more than a bunch of do's and don'ts, and it's putting chains and shackles on somebody. It's not what it is at all. In fact, it provides freedom. People think it provides shackles, but actually, when you go away from the word of God, that's what puts the shackles and chains on you, not the word of God. That's why James calls it the law of liberty. It's the perfect law. And notice James says, not only looking at it, not only hearing it, but abiding by it. In other words, obeying it, putting it into use, putting it into practice. Remember that earlier this week, we talked about measuring twice. That's putting it into practice. And he says, not becoming a forgetful hearer. In other words, just hearing the word of God and say, oh, that was nice, and then move on. I can't tell you how many times I've heard my pastor growing up as a child, hearing the word of God and then walking out. And by the time I get to our car as a family, I have completely forgotten what the pastor has said. Not a good way to live, but taking it home and looking at it and saying, where's one thing that applies to my life as I look at these verses? He says, but an effectual doer, notice the promise, this man will be blessed in what he does. So today, as you look yourself in the mirror, as you're shaving, men, as you're putting on your makeup, ladies, take a look in the mirror and ask God to answer this question. Am I just a passing listener, or am I an effectual doer of your word? And then go with God, because he goes with you. God bless.